I'm with Jeff Albert. He'll be visiting Auburn. He's a New Orleans trombonist, improviser, and electroacoustic composer. His music is electroacoustic. He's pretty much all acoustic, just himself.
At least on this tour, yeah. There are times when other more electrical things get involved, but that's a lot of gear to haul around.
So bionic.
Easier with a trombone. Yeah.
Right. Jeff will be in town in Auburn on February 11, and he'll be performing for a Little Lunch Music series at the Jule Colin Smith Museum of Fine Art, which I coordinate. And I have brought him on here to interview about his music, the music he'll be playing. In addition to that, Little Lunch Music, he'll play with the jazz trio Cullars Improvisational Rotation on Thursday night, which we are there. I say we, that's a trio that I'm in with Dan Makowski and Jason DeBlanc. And on that night of the 11th, he and drummer Dave Capello will be performing with us, or we will be performing with them. They will be leading the show.
We will all be performing together. We will be a musical community.
There we go. And then for the third event, we'll be at the Loft in Columbus. Their Friday Jazz at the Loft series. That will be 7 to 9 Eastern time. The other events will be Central Time. A Little Lunch Music Thursday will be noon to 1 as usual, and then Thursday night is 5 to 8. And then on Friday, 7 to 9 Eastern time at the Loft. Great jazz series at the Loft. Lots of good music there.
I forget that you live somewhere where you actually have to make that distinction.
Yes,
Central Eastern
right over and us going over there is a lot hard. Sometimes they come to our events and they're early, and so they have to wander around Auburn for an hour. But in my case, we have to get ourselves ready early so we can get over there in time for the gig. Jeff Albert, Dave Capello, drummer Dave Capello, they have recorded an album, and awesome, and it's up here on the. Shake it a little more. Say something, and so it says.
Okay, so it pulls up. So this is the CD that Dave and I recorded. Yeah. It's called Duets 2014 because we recorded it in 2014, and it's Duets.
And the duets
it just came out this past year. It's completely improvised music. Dave and I brought my recording rig to Dave's house. He's got this little space in his basement. We call it a basement, but it's New Orleans, so it's not really a basement. It's not actually underground, but
that would be dangerous.
The lowest level in his house. It feels like a basement.
Yeah.
Which is where his drums are, where he practices, and we rehearse down there sometimes and stuff. So I just brought my recording rig over and set up some microphones, and Dave and I played for, I don't know, probably a couple hours. We stopped and went and got coffee and, went to the store and told stories and whatever. And so this record is what came out of it. And it was totally improvised. We didn't even really talk much before we played each episode about let's do something fast or slow or loud or whatever. Yes. And so the tracks on the CD are actually all just numbered. I'll hold that up again so you can see. They don't actually have names. They just have numbers and times because it didn't make any sense to come up with goofy names for them because
not this time.
There was no meaning behind it, so they're just numbered. And the CD is actually the order that things happened that day. It's it's almost like you were hanging out in Dave's basement with us.
I've heard this, and everything is very distinctive. I mean, as well experienced improvisers often are able to produce in a completely improvised setting very, very different sounding tracks, pieces, and
episodes is a good word.
Right.
I like episodes. They're different episodes.
Not psychotic episodes.
Well, some
Sometimes,
of them are.
maybe.
Yeah.
Jeff and I, if this makes it out here, if there's any comfort level or familiarity that you sense between Jeff and I, we are friends. We go back quite a number of years.
All the way into last century.
That's
and
right.
Even like a decade and some change into the last century.
That's right. Yep. So, so Jeff is a New Orleans-based improviser. He hasn't always been an improviser. Well, he has, as long as I've known him, been an improviser in the most technical sense.
But that hasn't always been like the focus of my artistic output.
Right. So since I brought it up like that, will you talk to me a little bit about the evolution from starting out as we can bypass grade school and high school marching band and jazz band music and go right into you're making a living as a gigging musician in New Orleans, which you still do.
I would say that high school jazz band music might have something to do with the beginnings of it. But when I went to college at Loyola University in New Orleans, I have to put that plug in because I teach there now. So all you kids who want to be musicians, come see us. Now, I was a jazz studies major, played trombone. I, in the back of my mind, sort of thought I wanted to be J.J. Johnson, but really just had this, like, I want to make a living playing trombone vibe. Wasn't so much in, like, pursuing the idea of being an artist, was just more wanted to be a craftsman trombone player and playing horn sections and, bands and whatever. And I did that until I was about in my late 20s. I very much just did the kind of jobbing musician life. And it was cool. I was making a living playing trombone. I had sort of met that goal. But the funny thing was, after I reached that goal and realized, oh, hey, that thing that I wanted to do, I'm doing that now. Then I thought, oh, well, there's probably more to this. And then I realized I wanted to play music that had some artistic outlet for me. And I found that the music that fit that description best was largely improvised music, or some people might call it free jazz. The terminology gets difficult. I think what I do generally when left to my own devices is definitely coming out of the jazz lineage. I tend to deal with swing-based rhythms and things. There are a lot of things in what I do that look and smell like jazz. Although people might say it's not, and I'm fine with that. I don't really care what you call it, but it comes out of that jazz space. In this particular case, the things that I'm doing with Dave Capello recently are actually just fully improvised. Although in other aspects of my output, there's compositions or other structures or things. And I think some of the music that we'll play in Auburn, when we team up with the Cullars Improvisational Rotation,
right,
we will
improvisational.
We'll have some structures. I have some pieces that I recorded called instigation quartets that are like some text-based instructions to sort of get the improvisation started. And I've got some other stuff that I'm going to bring. We'll see how it goes at rehearsal.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. I mean, we sort of have to live up to our name. We do some improvisation that doesn't specifically keep itself within the constraints of a jazz tune or some other song that jazz normally sort of fits into. But you mentioned how your improvisation is going to, anything you do, anything that I've heard you do does harken back to your training as a jazz musician, but I think what you said is important. It's difficult. You don't want to call this free jazz necessarily, because improvisers who don't have a jazz background necessarily, and they come into an improvising situation, or they are improvising musicians, and they might have rock and folk and all kinds of other backgrounds, but they improvise and can fit in with the other improvisers who have completely different backgrounds. And in fact, another, and I'll mention this now, another musician, this is my pen. Another
It's a
musician.
beautiful pin.
Thank
too.
you. Another musician, an improvising group, will be here on January 21st, playing for a Little Lunch Music called The Few, and they're from Chicago. Steve Marquette is a guitarist, and he came last January with some people. One was Mars Williams, and Mars is a saxophonist, and Nick Mazzarella is also a saxophonist, and completely different backgrounds and sounds and approaches to the instrument. Mars has a big history in playing rock bands from the 80s and on through to today.
Even his current day gig, he plays with the Psychedelic Furs.
Right.
Sort of his day job.
Yeah. And Nick clearly has a background trained in jazz, has been listening to a lot of jazz, plays a lot of, reminds me of a lot of just the classic evolution of the jazz saxophonist through the decades. So, but they play really great together and it works. So they're improvisers. And I think I like the fact, and I'm new to the genre in the sense of listening to it, even still new after being aware of it since we were in college. But I think back then was pretty much scared of it just because seemed to be so out there, but it's really not. It comes from right inside.
See, that's funny because I found it completely liberating.
Right.
Whereas it felt like you took this comfort and like, okay, there's all these chord changes and I know what to do with those chord changes.
Right.
And so I feel very safe here. And I was completely the opposite. I was like, I don't know what to do with all of those chord changes. Look, over here, there's no chord changes. I feel safe here. It was almost, Anyway.
Yeah, I think it took some personal maturity for me to get to a point where I could go, no rules. Okay. And to get into that.
And that no rules idea is actually a little bit of a misnomer because there are rules, but the overarching rule is the same as with all music, which is do stuff that sounds good.
What are rules? When you say that there are rules, talk about what that means.
Well, they're more aesthetic rules as opposed to technical rules, right? If you're playing, in some sort of very standard jazz idiom, there are even harmonic and melodic rules about like, okay, these notes over this chord will give you that idiomatic sound that we're used to hearing in this space. Whereas in a more open improvisational setting, the rules are more about making musical choices and listening to what's going on around you. They're more like social rules. It's the same thing as, I don't want to say raise your hand to talk in class, but don't scream over other people. Except there are types of communication when screaming over other people is what's expected,
right?
Since it's political season. So, I guess, I can't really enumerate a list of rules, but I don't want to say this idea of like, there's no rules. That's not really completely accurate. There are, etiquettes and behaviors that are accepted and that end up making good music.
Does it depend on sort of the comfort and familiarity that you have with the people you're playing with?
I think it does. And I think sort of what the rules and the etiquettes are might vary from situation to situation. And they sort of get negotiated each time.
Because that's similar, I think, in any band setting, in any ensemble setting. You can pretty much get a pickup band of any jazz musician in the area. And you guys all generally, if you don't have the music in front of you, you have a few tunes that or a lot of tunes that and you have this sort of common vocabulary. And you can get through a gig, but if there's not a comfort level or a familiarity or some kind of understanding of stepping on each other's toes and what role each person plays at any given point, but I think then you have a problem. And in improvised music, I feel like you're working with, instead of nuance, though of course, obviously there are nuances, and sometimes it's extremely nuanced music. Sometimes I think your building blocks are the things that you do. You're moving furniture around sometimes rather than arranging dishes on a table.
Sometimes it's on a larger scale. Yeah, and often, I guess, different aspects of the music take different levels of privilege. Like, so in a standard jazz situation, it's very much about harmony and rhythm. Even often the melodic content is based on harmony, right? So it's
Okay.
rhythm is a high, and I won't even say rhythm, like groove is a highly privileged aspect, and harmonic negotiation is a highly privileged aspect in a kind of standard jazz setting. Some people deal more on melody, but that sort of melody, harmony, groove space is essentially what the music is about. And in more open improvisational settings, often you will start to privilege different aspects of the music. Things like timbre will take on a role that's farther up the hierarchy of what we're dealing with. You know, like in standard jazz idioms, timbre is definitely part of the thing. You know, you listen to Sonny Rollins, and like he'll play with notes, and like timbre is a big part of what Sonny does. But it's still probably not the top of his expressive food chain, right? Still, much of what he does is about, boy, there's a lot of mixed metaphors in here. Still, what he does is largely about, you know, melody and harmony.
Right.
So, in more open improvised settings, especially in the sort of space that I'm used to doing it, timbre comes into play. Shapes of gestures as opposed to like specific melodic shapes. Things can become more abstract. It's less about preset harmony, although harmony plays a role, but it's sort of the harmony that develops over the course of the improvisation. You know, a lot of these factors are still here. They just get negotiated in real time instead of having aspects of it laid out ahead of time. You know, like if we decide we're going to play a blues in F, okay, we've just laid out there's going to be this tempo thing, probably this groove thing. This will be the harmonic speed, you know. And so we know certain aspects of what are going to happen. We've negotiated that by deciding we're going to play blues in F.
We're going to do a swing blues in F, and it's going to be this tempo. You know the tempo because somebody counts it off. So that's going to be this key, so you have a tonality. And
and you
might
can
even
do the
have a
math
melody.
and know how many seconds from now that a B flat 7 will be sounding, you know, like the grid gets laid out. And what happens in more open improvisational situations is those things aren't predetermined. It's not to say that forms don't take shape, but they get negotiated in real time, and usually through musical means instead of verbal means. Right, like the negotiation happens because somebody will play something, and other people will musically either sort of agree with or reject that idea, and we'll sort of negotiate until we find a space that we agree on.
Just as an aside, Steve, though he's from Chicago, Jeff is from New Orleans. Steve and Jeff are connected and have performed together and toured together. And Steve, when he comes down through Auburn on the 21st, will then he's heading down your way, isn't he?
Yes, he'll be here after he's in Auburn. Yeah.
Right. So there will be dates for that. And if you will, maybe you can, since we're talking about this now, maybe if you have any of those dates, just in case anybody happens to listen to this, they'll know.
If anybody's going to be in New Orleans, they're performing. It's a Monday and a Tuesday. Let me flip up to my calendar real quick here. On the Monday night, on the Instant Opus series at the Hi-Ho Lounge, that's the 25th of February. I'm sorry, the 25th of January. And then Tuesday, the 26th, at the Open Ears Music Series, which is at the Blue Nile on Frenchman Street. On the 25th at Instant Opus, it'll be smaller groups, I think trios and quartets, improvising with some New Orleans musicians and the Chicago musicians who are traveling with Steve. And then on the 26th, it will be 2 sets of large improvisations. And these musicians on these dates actually in New Orleans will be different than the people he'll be in Auburn with, which is his band, The Few, which is an improvising string trio. Although The Few is doing some New Orleans gigs. The Few are. that band is
I
also
think it is.
performing. Yeah, I felt like a British sportscaster for a second.
Talking about a football team,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The few are, right.
Anyway, they're playing. I think that previous weekend here after they leave up there.
Yeah. So that's good, and I'll try to reference that another time. Okay, so let's assume Brittany, you're a chamber musician, which you are. This is certainly chamber music, especially when it's small. It would be awesome to hear the larger ensemble situation. Okay, let's not talk about this like it's from Mars and we have. Maybe I use a different planet because Mars is a great improviser. Let's not talk about it is from Mars.
Yes.
Let's not talk about it.
And you can't say Saturn because that's where Sun Ra's from.
That's right.
Which reminds me
Birmingham.
remind me to tell you the story about the Sun Ra record contract where he wanted to keep all the rights on Saturn.
Okay.
We should do that. Probably not in this broadcast.
Another one.
But, yeah.
I want to talk about improvised music as if it's a thing already, so in the sense of if you were to talk about the music, let's specifically about what you and Dave do, you as an improvising duo, in the context of other improvisers, in the context of other improvised music or music that it is immediately relatable to. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't want this to be us talking about why you should, as you and I have discussed before, eat your vegetables and come hear this.
Well, actually, I don't.
Good for you.
I don't think it's that at all. I don't know that it's good for you. I just think it's interesting music,
right?
And it's interesting on a very social level because you get to see deep personal interactions of two people unfold in real time through a different medium, through this sonic medium as opposed to the verbal medium. It's watching Dave and I play a duo is kind of like hanging out in Dave's basement with us talking about whatever crazy conspiracy theory book he just read or whatever. It's essentially having a conversation, but it's a different medium. We're doing it through these musical sounds instead of the words that we're using. Dave and I improvising with him playing drums and me playing trombone is really, in many senses, the function very similar to the conversation you and I are having right now. Like, we come in and we maybe have some idea of what we're going to talk about, but it goes off into other places. And that's the same thing that happens musically. Yeah, I very much don't like the idea of saying, "Oh, this is good for you. You should go check it out." I think it's good music. I like listening to people do it, and it is open in that it can incorporate a lot of things. Like, we probably won't play any Britney Spears tunes, but it could happen.
You're right. There's probably a better chance that you will do that than that a jazz group will do that, or us, the trio that plays at the museum.
Yeah. Except I don't really know any Britney Spears tunes because my kids are a little too young for that.
Right.
Taylor Swift, maybe. Some of those
I have a couple of Taylor Swift arrangements in my head for so we'll see how that happens.
Actually, I took my daughters to her concert, and I have to admit, it was like some super high-end showbiz, man. She puts on a good show.
I like Taylor Swift.
It was, yeah.
I'm very often singing her songs in my head.
Yeah, we should get back to what were we talking about?
I don't know. I don't know, but for some reason you're coming to Auburn, Alabama in a few weeks.
I am. It's to make some music.
Yeah. Well, so you'll be what you and Dave do, and what you'll do on the noon concert is basically how you approach the recording that you're selling, the CD, the album, the wax album that you'll be bringing.
It's not a wax cylinder, and it's not on vinyl, but I do call it an album meaning a collection of things that belong together.
Yeah. So you guys may it would probably be a good idea to feature the two of you. Not everything, all the details of this at this point in January have not been worked out for the February dates for you and Dave, but it would probably be a good idea to feature you guys as a duo on the Thursday night and also at the Loft in Columbus.
Yeah, we'll probably do a little bit of that. But the thing is, those types of interactions they don't have to stand alone, right? Those can happen within the context of the things that happen in the evening.
Sure. Just because you have 5 people playing music doesn't mean they all have to be playing at the same time.
Actually, it's often better when they're not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But for us who are the 3 of us in Cullars who are less initiated into strict improvisational doctrine, though that's probably an oxymoron.
Wow, there's some loaded language in that. Wow.
No, we just don't have the experience. It's as simple as that. We all are improvisers, but within certain parameters. And though we have all freely improvised now and then in different scenarios and with each other, I think it'll be for us, it'll be a bit of a workshop. So yeah, when you mentioned it earlier, when you play, what did you call it? What were the quartets that you?
Oh, instigation quartets.
Yeah, tell me about the instigation quartets.
So the instigation quartets.
Can you do those with 5 people?
Yes, you can. Actually, I wrote some for my sextet that we did back in December. These came about actually, I guess, in 2010. I went and did a series of gigs in Dortmund, Germany, with this group called New Generation, which was Georg Grave was a pianist over there, and the Ruhr Valley region had like the cultural capital thing of Europe for that year. So they had a bunch of money to make music happen. So Georg put together this 12-piece band. Well, it was 11 of us who were supposed to be under 40, although I had just turned 40, but don't tell anybody. And then Tobias Delius, the great European saxophonist, was the musical director. And it was, I think, 3 Americans and 4 Americans. Everybody else was European, but we were from all over the place, and there was strings and winds and percussion. And Toby encouraged us all to compose for the group, but he said, we've got a couple days of rehearsal in these performances, so like if you write a bunch of really hard notey stuff, it might not get played. And so there were compositions for smaller groups, and we did some things with all 12.
But and you said this, you're coming in as improvisers. This was not.
Yes. It's an improvising group. We all sort of come from that improvised music, free jazz, whatever you want to call it, space.
Okay.
And so I wrote these instigation quartets, which are essentially just text instructions to help speed up the negotiations at the beginning of an improvisation. So there will be instructions for each of the 4 members, like it might say, player 1, play long tones. Player 2, make small noises. Player 3, wait some period of time and then react to player 2. Or, whatever. It's just instructions like that. And then once the episode gets started, we would improvise as you would in any other free improvisation setting. It does a couple of things. It shortens the negotiations at the beginning. It starts in a more coherent space, and it also helps prevent certain players from deferring to other players. Like there's often sort of a perceived social hierarchy. For example, when we come in and play with you guys in a few weeks, it would be very simple once the improvisations start, once we start playing, for y'all to look at me and Dave and say, well, we're just going to hang out and see what they do, and then kind of go along with that.
Right.
So it's easy. Or, I actually recorded these instigation quartets with Kid Jordan and Hamid Drake and Joshua Abrams. And, Kid is the patron saint of improvisers in New Orleans. He's like the grand leader of sort of that aesthetic space. And so it would be very easy to get in the studio with Kid and say, well, okay, I'm completely going to defer to Kid.
Right.
But having these structures set up actually put us on this equal setting or equal footing, at least for the beginning of the improvisation, because we each had instructions of what to do. So it sort of democratizes the process a little bit. And it helps you find a space. And so if you want to, if it's the point in the night where you're like, okay, I feel like we need some regular tempo, I can call one of the instigation quartets that has like some tempo instruction that says, okay, we start with a groove or whatever. So it's a way to have a little more control over the flow of the evening and to ease some of the interactions between the players without actually removing that feeling of being sort of open, free improvising.
Yeah, that's cool. And did you write that with that in mind, thinking about sort of having different, like tying a knot with two different kinds of rope? You know, you've got to have the right kind of connection, thinking about other people being involved. And maybe
I think actually when I initially wrote them for the gigs in Germany, I did them because they were quick and I knew they wouldn't take long to rehearse.
Yeah.
And I could compose them pretty quickly. I sort of, after doing them, realized all of these other benefits, and so have then, done them in other settings, and often for, any particular gig, we'll just write a couple of new ones, just to have like some improvised space.
That's what we'll hear on when we come together when Cullars Improvisational Rotation comes together with Jeff Albert and Dave Capello. Jeff and Dave are from New Orleans. Will be joining us again in Auburn Auburn and Columbus, Georgia, for 3 events. A little lunch music on February 11 at noon. Then the jazz food art after hours, Thursday after hours event at the museum from 5 to 8. Then again at the Loft in Columbus on Friday, February 12th, 7 to 9 Eastern time.
And then on Saturday, the 13th, we will be in Columbia, South Carolina.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Columbus to Columbia, just because it seemed to make sense.
Give me the details for Columbia. So
actually, I'm not exactly sure what the details are because
okay.
the sort of regular improvised music space is closed, but my connection assures me that he will hook up something cool. I don't know. We might be playing at a fish market or something. I don't really know. But Ross always comes up with interesting gigs. So
okay.
We're going to go over there and do that.
That's the Saturday?
Saturday, the 13th.
The 13th. Great. Okay. Thank you, Jeff, for talking with me, and appreciate all the time that you've spent helping me with this and also working all morning. This is all I've done. Try to see if I can wrap my 45, almost 46-year-old mind around Google Hangouts.
Oh, it's exciting. It was fun. I think it worked great. I can't wait to see the video. Well, I mean, I've kind of already seen the video. But,
right. It'll be up in mere seconds. As soon as I stop this, it will process and it will be live. Maybe I'll just leave it. But good. Well, thanks, Jeff. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Testing.
Okay.
All right. So here we are.
1, 2.
Okay, go 2.
3.
You do it.
Yeah, but it's not going to make a sound on yours. We have to. Never mind. Okay.
No, you're right. It won't. But the video will be off. Let's try it. What happens? Okay. Can we even do it together? 1, 2, 3.
Well, we could have if you weren't laughing, you bozo.
We clapped at the same time, I think. I watched you. I think we came down. I don't know.
We'll see. No, we didn't. I was way before you.
Oh, okay. Well, on my end, we did. So this is